Hello, AP Scholars. We are going to be looking at question 2 from the dice notation assignment. So the second question is going to be writing some methods that involve dealing with array lists and strings and looping through things. This is exactly the kind of question you might expect on the AP exam that'll be coming up. It uses a lot of the material that is going to be testable on this exam, and it's why I designed this question. It's other than I thought it was cute to do it with a dice thing because I love games that involve dice, but it's really a good representation. Both question 1 and question 2 are good representations of the kind of things you'll be doing on this AP exam. So in this second question, we introduce you to the concept of advanced dice notation. Basically, you can have a whole bunch of simple dice notation statements combined together to make advanced dice notation statement. So you can see here where it's always about adding together the results from different die rolls. And like, why? What kind of game uses this? So, for example, maybe you are playing Dungeons and Dragons, and you are playing a character that uses a longsword. So, a longsword does 1d8 damage in Dungeons and Dragons, but maybe someone casts a spell on you to create your or to add an enchantment to your sword, so you're doing fire damage. So in addition to its regular 1d8 from its sharp steel, it also does an additional 2d6 damage from the fire. So then you're actually going to be, when you roll for damage, when you hit the troll or whatever you're attacking, you would roll a d8 and 2d6 to determine damage. Oh, but also it turns out that in this game you have a strength modifier because a stronger character will do more damage, so you can add on your modifier. And maybe you're really strong, so it's going to be it doesn't seem like a large number, but 5 is a good strength modifier in the game. So this is actually how much damage you do with a flaming longsword if you were strong. So that's a little bit of a mouthful there, but it's the way you encode these things. And what's going to make this a great AP computer science question is that it involves a class we already wrote. And for this question, I'm going to assume that your SDN, your simple dice notation class, is flawless. So if there's problems with this one, I don't care. For purposes of this question, I care for the purposes of this question, and I hope I can help you solve those problems. But we'll assume it's flawless when you do question 2. So we have to be able to roll this and store it. And the way we're going to store it, at least according to the question, I don't know if it's necessarily the optimal way, but this is the way the question asks you to store it, is that you're going to make a list of simple dice notation statements. So an advanced dice notation object is going to have a list of simple dice notation objects. So, for example, this would have a 2d4 simple dice notation and a 3d12. And then there's this possible plus 10. It may or may not be in here. This is a plus, just a single integer. Like, for example, this one does not have the integer at the end. This one does. So that throws a bit of a wrinkle in because it may or may not have a just straight up integer. And there's only going to ever be one, and we can store that as a single mod. I mean, it's possible in Dungeons & Dragons that there's multiple modifiers, integer modifiers, but they can all just combine into one single number. Because you can add integers together, and because of the commutative property of addition, you can move them all to the end. So it'll just assume there's a plus, single number at most, and possibly also no additional numbers. So that's a bit of a tricky part of the question. It gives you some stuff here to see what's going on, and you should definitely read this over to get a sense of what's going on and to know what you can work with, because your questions you're going to answer require you to interact with the class itself. You're going to be assigning things to your instance variables, for example. And here you can see how the parse method is being called. So it gives you a bit of an idea how to do some of these things. So you would read that over, and then part A asks you to complete the parse method. So this is where I'm going to basically do this method. It gives you some interesting things to know. For example, the parse method is going to read in the parameter myDice. This is a string, and it's going to loop through it and fill the SDN list, this array list, with simple dice notation objects. And it may, if there is a single integer at the end, it will assign that value to the mod variable, instance variable, as well. And if it doesn't find an integer modifier, it's going to just leave it as 0. There you go. And we can assume that my dice will have a valid advanced dice notation statement, so we don't have to check if it's broken or something like that. Okay, so there we go. We're going to do this question. So I could just copy this over to my editor, which is super nice that I can do that. Yay! And implementation is not shown. That's true, but I'm going to start showing it now. If I was to upload this, I probably would just upload this part of it. I wouldn't bother to bring over the comment, but whoa, I'm not sure what I did there. I collapsed it. I do not. I do definitely want to bring this over so I can read it and not have to flip back and forth. So let's do it. So my dice is going to be a simple dice notation statement plus another one possibly, and then maybe or maybe not plus some like int. And so I need to either loop through the string, finding pluses to stop on and isolate individual, SDN statements, or I can cheat and use something like the split method. And I'm going to use the split method. If you're not familiar with the split method, it's a really handy one. So what I can do is I can say my dice.split. This is technically not on the AP exam subset. It's not something that you'll ever be tested on, but gosh, is it useful. So what split does is it will split a string into an array of strings. Then the split will be based on a substring that you put in here. So for example, I'll put in plus. And then I will say string array, I don't know what to say, stuff, I don't know. These are the SDNs. These are the statements. SDN, I guess I'll just call it that. SDNs, I'll pluralize it. I don't know. I'm not too sure. But what's this going to be after you do this? So let's say my dice was 3d6 plus 1d8 plus 30 apparently. Whoa, ooh, powerful. So what will happen if that was our string? And actually, there shouldn't be any spaces in there. That's not part of it. So if that was our string, what happens after this? So basically, what will happen is that this array will be filled with 3 different strings. It'll be this string, it'll be this string, and it will be this string, because it split it over the pluses. The pluses won't end up in the array, but it will create an array that will have all the information that's around the pluses. So we'll end up getting, after this, like SDNS sub 0 is going to be, like, it'll just evaluate to be, I don't want to make this syntax, it'll be the first part, 3d6, because it's split over the plus, so the plus is like sliced. This is where the knife gets sliced into these and split apart. So this will be 3d6. And SDNS 1 is going to be this part here, 1d8. And these are strings. They haven't changed their type at all. They're still strings, so we have to remember that to deal with them. Last but not least, this will get put in there. So SDNS 2 will be 30, but the string 30. And how many there are will be dependent on the original string. So if there's like 40 plus signs, then it'll make an appropriately sized array. This array will just be the right size to accommodate all the things you've split through. So that's what I'm going to do for my split. And why is that great? Well, I don't have to mess around with index of to go find all the plus signs. I don't have to mess around with I don't know what other ways people might have done it. Probably like maybe a recursive method or something to like be looking for plus signs and substringing it. It's like it already did the substring for me. Oh, it's so beautiful. And now what I can do is I can just loop through SDNS, and I can take each statement, because it'll be a complete simple dice notation statement, and then construct it. I suppose it's possible that the last one might not be, in which case I better not try to send it to my constructor for the simple dice notation, because it won't be a valid simple dice notation statement. So I have to check to see if it's a integer or if it's a simple dice notation statement. Technically, I should do that only at the end, but it might just be more convenient to make a general purpose statement that checks to see if it's got a D in it or it doesn't have a D in it, because that's going to be the deciding factor. Okay, so here we go. Let's do it. I think I'll do a for loop, and I'll say int I equals 0, and while I is less than this array dot length, and I plus plus. And then what I'll do is I will I'll access SDNS sub I. And then we already, if you look at our simple dice notation constructor, we'll construct that object. So we can send it to the constructor. So how do you call a constructor for an object? You could give it a variable. So simple dice notation object, we'll call it, we'll just call it my SDN. And that this is a variable I've created that can hold a simple dice notation statement. And then I can say new, which is going to allow the constructor to work. Simple dice notation, and I can send it this string. And then it will construct the object, and then I can add it to the list. So I can say, what's the name of my list? I guess I do have to go back. SDN list. Great. So I can say SDN list dot add my SDN. Now that's great, but it assumes that all of those statements are SDN statements, not an integer. So I should probably, before I do this, I should check it to make sure I didn't get an integer. So I'll say something like this: if SDNS sub I dot index of D is less than 0. Because remember, if the index of returns a negative number, it didn't find a D. Didn't find the D. Oh, actually, guess I want this to happen, so it'll be if it's greater than 0. It can't actually be 0 if it's a properly formatted one, but I'll put greater or equal to 0 anyways. And oh, I wonder, is there an auto format in here? Huh. That would be a really nice thing if it had some auto format. I don't see it. I know you can download a package to make it happen, so we should probably talk about that at some point. But whatever, I'll just tab in. So you can just press tab here. So yeah, so if it's greater 0 or greater, then we make a simple dice notation statement, because that means there was a D in it. Else, I guess there was no D, so it must be an integer. So we're going to assign the mod. So this dot mod equals integer dot parse int SDN sub I. So that's the way I would solve this question. I guess technically, if I'm committing to using this for all my instance variables, the list is also an instance variable. So I should say this.sdn list. It would have worked fine without this, just so you know. But I said I was going to do that, so I'll keep doing it. So there's my answer. I think that's the end of that story. Yeah, it's pretty decent. It's a pretty decent way to do it. I think that one thing I might do, though, to make this a little bit simpler, and so I wouldn't have to use the index, I think a nice thing to do is use a for each loop. So although this is correct, and you can use control/, by the way, just like in processing, I might do it this way. So I might say, using the for each loop, for each string, and I'll call it my SDN in the SDNS array, do the following. So the value here is I don't have to use I, so I don't have to actually access a particular one. This is all automated for me. It's going to start with the first one in the array and automatically move to the second one in the array and automatically stop when we run out of things in the array. So now I can copy this over and awkwardly uncomment that out. So now I can just say my SDN, because that will represent the object. So if my SDN.inst of is greater than 0, then, oh, that's awkward. I kind of mixed up my variable names. So let's not call this SDN, let's call it just A. It's just going to be the first string. So if that string has something in it, then we will construct our new object based on that string and then add it to the list. Otherwise, we can do this. So for each loop is nice in that it keeps this a little bit simpler. We don't have to use I always. Things are a little bit tighter. It's not much different though, so there it is. I don't know. You can choose either solution. So there you go. So there's the answer to the part A of this question, and we'll move on to part B. Did I complete my? Yeah, I completed my braces. So part B asks us to complete the roll method. Okay, so roll basically is going to roll all of the dice that are in the list. And that's actually a lot easier than it sounds. I don't know, maybe it doesn't sound hard, but you might have thought it was hard. And oh yeah, check it out, that was supposed to be private. This one is supposed to be public, however. I guess I could just copy and paste it over, hey? Yeah, sure, let's just copy and paste. Might as well, avoid that possibility of typing something wrong. So it's kind of similar to the previous roll method we wrote. I'm going to have a sum variable that I'll initialize to not 9, to 0. I wonder if I could actually initialize it to mod. That'd be an interesting way to do it. Huh. Yeah, that's not a bad way to do it, because we're only going to have one modifier. If it's 0, cool. If it's not 0, then cool, we've already added in our modifier. And then what we can do is just loop through the list of SDN statements and just roll them, tell them to roll themselves, and add that sum. So let's make that. I'm going to use the for each loop here again. I'm loving the for each loop. So the for each loop is going to be going through the SDN list. And each time it's going to get out an SDN, a simple dice notation object. And these are of type simple dice notation. Oh, thanks for typing that out for me, Adam. And basically, each SDN has its own roll method. So you can say SDN.roll. Because you wrote that already. That's a thing that simple dice notation objects can do. So I can say sum plus equals SDN.roll. And that's it. That's the answer. Return sum. I've already accounted for the mod here. Each one will just roll themselves. Woohoo! Oops. In case you're a little bit weirded out by the for each loop, this is just a fancy way or a shortcut way of writing the good old int I equals 0, which is assumed in the for each loop. I is less than SDN list dot size I plus plus, and then this would be SDN dot get I dot roll. Like that would be fine too. And if you wanted to do a little bit more to keep that separate, you could say something like simple dice notation. Just have it type for me. SDN equals SDN dot get I and sum plus equals SDN.roll. That's another way of doing this. I don't know which way you prefer to do it. If you like the for loop and see all the guts kind of the loop mechanics all splayed out in front of you so you can adjust for them and stuff, that's good. The for each loop is particularly useful here to go through them. And I don't know, it's your choice. Either one would be correct. But this is my answer for part B. So I'll upload these to Teams, and I hope that was clear. If you have any questions about this, do not hesitate to contact me. I'll be happy to either modify this video, I guess not modify it, but add an additional video to explain your question, or just give you a text answer in Teams. Okay, thanks everybody. Bye-bye.